Welcome to another session of Doni's Daily Dose, which is basically just a couple of minutes where I just take a moment to share something that's on my mind or some, I don't know, hard earned wisdom from my walk in this life. But today it's actually going to be a reaction to a conversation that I had, actually a very pleasant conversation that I want to kind of address because I'm sure other people feel the same way. Um, and I usually don't react to what people say, without thinking through something. Now, actually, if you talk to my staff, they'll say, yes, you do react. So I'm working on that. But I mean, when it comes to public opinion about things, I really don't generally care about public opinion. But this is somebody I like and I care about. And I actually kind of go back a ways with. But what happened was yesterday, I mentioned that I stopped to help these two gentlemen that were cleaning up the street because a tree had fallen. And I gave them a special shout out. And I also mentioned the fact that they were African American. They were brothers. And I feel like I got something in my eye. Hold on. Do I got something in my eye? No, I guess I ain't got nothing in my eye. But anyway, I feel like I do. But anyway, I mentioned that they were brothers. And so my friend reached out and said, well, why did you have to mention that? What does it matter what color they are? Well, we do not live in a society where nobody sees colors. Everybody sees color. And people that say they don't see color, that's a whole nother woke story I'm not going to get into. But the reason why I periodically will stop to mention something good that happened that may have involved an African-American man, an African-American woman, a Hispanic man, a Hispanic woman, and I do highlight white people that do great stuff too, and people that have been mentors. I've got a Jewish gentleman that has been a mentor of mine for a long, long time. But the reason why yesterday I specifically mentioned that the gentleman was black was because the two gentlemen that helped were African American, is because in our society as a whole, I'm not saying everybody, so I'm not talking about every person, but as a whole, we do not hear enough good stories about good things that regular, everyday African American men do. And just to even point that out, most of the men that are friends of mine that are African American or Latino or brown or black men, most of them in my friend group are happily married, healthy men that do good stuff for their family, do good stuff for the community, and are good husbands and fathers. But you know what? We don't hear about them. If you ask the average person, I'm not saying every person, but the average, what they honestly think about how the media portrays black men, it's not very favorable. And that's not a made up theory. That's not a lie. That's not something that's made up in my head. My father is a black man. And yes, my father has got some issues. And yes, I've talked about those issues. But you know what? My parents were also married for 40 something years before, decided to go their own, a whole nother story. But 40 years. My father was in my life every day of my life as a kid. He taught me great values and all those kind of things. And there are people that don't have that. I get it. But when I was a kid, that was not unusual. That was absolutely the norm. But when you start tearing down a society and you start implementing um, uh, you start implementing systemic racism and other things, it can have an effect on the whole community. Now, does that mean that on an individual basis you are not supposed to do better? Of course you are. Like on an individual basis, it's my responsibility to do better. Can I acknowledge that racism happens? Absolutely. And to address my friend, the reason why race matters is the same thing that happened to a famous movie maker, actually the gentleman that was I believe he was either producer or director of Wakanda. He was the producer of Black Panther. This gentleman went into a bank to withdraw money out of his own account and wound up in handcuffs because of suspicion from a bank teller. And here's the crazy thing. The bank teller wasn't even white. She's African American, from what I understand. But it's a energy and an ideology that people have about our men that and our people that has to change. So that's why I speak out. Now, here's the funny thing about that story. And I haven't mentioned this in public very, very often. Actually, I haven't mentioned it at all because the story just happened. That same bank that gentleman got arrested at, the very same bank, the same branch, the same exact branch, the same thing happened to me. Luckily, I didn't wind up in handcuffs. Yes, they called the police on me at that bank, the very same bank where a black man who was trying to withdraw money out of his own account wound up in handcuffs. That very same bank called the police on me for a very similar issue. The only reason why I didn't wind up in handcuffs is because, guess what? When the police showed up, it happened to be an officer that I happened to know. And he couldn't understand why he was there. And I said, I have no idea why you're there either. And so we talked about it, joked about it, and we confronted the teller, talked to the manager, all that kind of stuff. They verified everything was fine. And they did my transaction, but not before calling the police on me for trying to do something that normal people do in banking, which is withdraw money from an account or cash a check. Yeah. So that's why I highlight race, because as much as people don't want to talk about it, it needs to be talked about. But on the same token, on an individual basis, we have to make changes to do what we need to do to make our lives better. But we also must acknowledge the injustices in the world. Those injustices don't stop us, but they can make things a little bit more challenging. But that's okay, because that means I will rise to the occasion. I will rise to the challenge. And I'll leave you with this. I was watching an interview with Will Smith today. And an interviewer at Gail, Oprah's friend Gail, she asked him, has race ever hindered you from becoming successful? And he said he did not look at race that way. He's like, he didn't look at it as a challenge. He said he embraced whatever came his way, overcame it, and was going to become successful anyway because of what's in here and what he puts up here. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he said he was not going to let race be a factor in whether he became successful or not. If anything, he was going to use it. So, yes, he became successful. Is there racism in Hollywood? Absolutely. But the fact that he even got asked that question lets you know what kind of society we live in. So, why do I talk about these things? Because they need to be talked about. But do I let that stop me? No, and neither should you. No matter what color you are, what sex you are, what gender you are, how you identify sexually, none of that. Do not let that stop you. Go be who you want to be, and don't let it stop you. But that does not mean we can't have real conversations about it. So yeah, that's why I talk about it. All right, be blessed. Y'all have a good one.